Taking care of my friend's house for a few weeks seemed easy. She traveled for work and left me the keys, asking only for me to water the plants and check the mail. It was a big and quiet house in a quiet neighborhood, but on the first night, I felt a strange discomfort. Small details began to bother me. A glass that I was sure I had left in the sink appeared on the counter. The door of the kitchen cabinet opened in the morning when I clearly remembered having closed it. I thought maybe it was my distraction, but as the days went by, the incidents increased. The sound of steps upstairs when I knew I was alone, muffled whispers at night, and even the constant feeling that someone was watching me. So, on the night that changed everything, someone knocked on the door. It was late, and I didn't expect anyone. When I looked through the magic eye, I saw a man standing there, dressed casually, but with an expression that made me restless. I opened the door just enough to see him better. He smiled and said he was my friend's brother, who had arrived earlier than expected and needed to get in. The problem? My friend never mentioned a brother. My instinct told me not to trust him, so I hesitated, asking his name. His smile disappeared for a second before answering, as if he were choosing the words carefully. Something in him made me want to close the door immediately. I didn't know what to do. Something in the way he looked at me made me uncomfortable, as if he was waiting for me to make a mistake. Still holding the door ajar, I said I needed to confirm with my friend before letting him in. He laughed, but not in a natural way. It was forced, almost mechanical. "Really? I'm her brother, you don't need all that," he said, trying to push the door lightly. My heart accelerated. I tried to look calm and firm by answering that I would only open it after talking to her. Your smile disappeared completely. He closed his fists, took a deep breath and, with a rougher tone, said he was tired from the trip and just wanted to rest. That's when I realized that I shouldn't have opened the door even an inch. Before I could react, he pushed the door hard. I tried to close it, but he already had a foot inside the house. My body froze for a second before I let out a scream and ran backwards. He entered and, without saying anything else, closed the door behind him, locking it. My cell phone was in the kitchen, too far for me to reach without him noticing. "We need to talk," he said, with a low and controlled tone, as if he wanted to look calm, but something in his voice trembled with impatience. I was completely alone with him, not knowing who he really was, and the only thing that went through my mind was, how was I going to get out of there? I took a step back, trying to keep his distance, but he advanced slowly, without taking his eyes off me. My heart was pounding in my chest. "Didn't my sister tell you about me?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, as if he were studying my reaction. His voice was now almost a whisper. I didn't know what to answer. If he said yes, he could keep insisting. If I said no, I could annoy him even more. I just decided to ask, "If you're her brother, why didn't they tell me you were coming?" He laughed again, that same forced laugh, and then shrugged. "She must have forgotten. But now it doesn't matter. I'm here." The way he said that made my skin shiver. The discomfort turned into pure fear when he locked the lock and put the key in his pocket. My stomach turned. I tried to stay calm. "I need to send her a message," I said, trying not to show panic. He shook his head. "You don't need to. You'll believe me in a little while." The phrase sounded like a threat. My hands started to sweat. I needed to get out of there somehow. My eyes went around the house, looking for anything I could use as a defense or any escape route, but he noticed and smiled from the corner. He knew I was cornered. I quickly looked at the corridor, looking for a way out. The man got even closer, the laughter strangely muffled and disconcerting. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, which made me even more tense. I knew I needed to act before it was too late. The feeling of being trapped inside that house increased every second. He was watching me with fixed eyes, as if he knew exactly what he was thinking. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm, my brain trying to find some solution. Without further words, he took a step to the kitchen door and turned to look at me once more. "It won't be that difficult, you'll understand." That was enough to make my blood freeze. He was referring to something I didn't understand yet. The feeling that I was about to discover something much darker intensified with each word. At that moment, a fleeting idea crossed my mind. What if he's not her brother? What if he's not anyone I know? The sounds in the house continued, but now I felt like I was being watched by something much more threatening than the man in front of me. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Suddenly, the sound of the phone ringing in my pocket broke the heavy silence. Without hesitation, I pulled him quickly, without paying attention to anything else, just hoping to find some relief. The call was not identified. I hesitated for a second, my heart beating in my chest so hard that it looked like it was going to explode. I looked at the man, who was now standing still, watching me carefully. He didn't move, but his gaze was already so fixed on me that I could barely think clearly. I knew I couldn't ignore the call. With a trembling hand, I answered the phone, waiting, perhaps, for a familiar voice or some explanation. But on the other side, what I heard was a heavy silence, as if someone was just listening to the sound of my breathing. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tension consumed me. That's when I heard the voice, weak and distant, but unmistakable. "He's not the brother. He's not who you think." The call was cut abruptly, before I could say anything else. The silence on the other side of the line only worsened the dread that was already taking over me. I quickly disconnected the call, but the man in front of me was now closer. He hadn't said a word, but something in the air was different. The atmosphere, which used to be tense, now seemed unbearable, heavy. He approached slowly, as if there was no more hurry. I knew that if he was there to hurt me, it wouldn't take long for him to do it. I needed to get out of there, and quickly. "I need to leave. Now." My voice came out almost like a whisper, but he just smiled. His smile gave me goosebumps up to my spine. It wasn't a friendly smile, nor polite. It was something empty, strange, as if he knew something I didn't know. He tilted his head slightly, still looking at me, and took a step forward. "You're not going anywhere." My throat dried up. My hands were shaking, but I tried not to show fear. Slowly, I took a step back, calculating my options. He was between me and the front door. All the windows had internal locks and bars. My cell phone was still in my hand, but trying to call someone again would only make him react unpredictably. I needed to get out of there. Now. That's when I noticed the kitchen right next door. If I could get there, maybe I would find something to defend myself, or a way out. I took a deep breath, and before he could react, I ran. My feet slid on the tile floor as I ran to the kitchen, my heart hammering so loud that I could barely think. Behind me, I heard heavy and hurried footsteps. He was coming. My hands grabbed the first object I found, a large kitchen knife. I turned around with her in my hand, pointing directly at him. "Stay where you are," I shouted, my voice coming out trembling. He stopped in the middle of the corridor, staring at me. The dim light in the kitchen cast strange shadows on his face. He breathed hard, his dark eyes shining in a way that made me feel even smaller. So to my surprise, he started laughing. A low laugh, almost fun. "Do you think this will help you?" He took a step forward, and I tightened the handle of the knife even more. My whole body was shaking. If he advanced another centimeter, I would have to react. My mind was spinning in search of a way out. The doors were locked. My cell phone was too far away for me to get it without him stopping me. I was arrested. My only chance was to scream. If there was someone on the street, a neighbor, anyone who could hear, it was that or be at his mercy. I took a deep breath and let out a scream with all the strength of my lungs. "Help! Help me!" My voice echoed through the house, breaking the silence of the night. I screamed again and again, feeling my throat burn. The man widened his eyes and threw himself on top of me, trying to shut me up. But before he reached me, the sound of hurried steps outside made his face change. Someone was coming. It was the neighbor. He had already noticed a strange movement in the house, and found everything very suspicious. First, the lights on until late, then, shadows moving near the windows. Something didn't seem right. So he kept watching from his balcony, attentive to any sign of problem. When he heard my desperate scream, he didn't think twice. He picked up the phone and called the police immediately, describing the situation. I didn't know that at that moment, but that simple gesture was what saved me. While the man in front of me hesitated, looking at the door and at me, as if trying to decide what to do, I took advantage of the moment to walk away, keeping my eyes on him, ready to react if I tried something. The seconds seemed endless. The man was breathing heavily, his eyes fixed on me, evaluating his options. I knew he realized that someone outside had heard. He gritted his teeth, annoyed, and then took a few steps back as if he were reconsidering. That's when we heard the sirens in the distance. The growing sound made his expression change to something between fury and despair. He looked at the door, at the windows, and then shot towards the back of the house. My heart raced when I saw him disappear through the corridors. I didn't know if he was trying to escape or if he was planning another approach. All I could do was run to the main door and turn the handle, hoping that, in the middle of the chaos, he had forgotten to lock it. Luckily for me, the door opened. I ran outside, stumbling on the steps of the balcony, feeling my whole body shaking. It was only then that I saw the neighbor, a middle-aged man, holding a phone and gesturing to the policeman who had just arrived. Before I could say anything, the police entered the house with guns in hand. My heart pounded while I waited outside, not knowing what would happen. It was tense minutes until one of the officers left and said that they had searched everything, but the man was no longer there. There were no signs of burglary in the back, nor any clue of where he would have escaped. It was as if he had simply disappeared. The first nights alone at home were quiet. My friend had traveled abroad, and I finally had some time to myself. No noise, no sly talk, just me and the silence. But soon I started to notice something strange. Every morning, when I was going to drink water or simply looked out the window out of habit, I saw the neighbor standing in her garden, staring at my house. At first, I thought it was something in my head. Maybe he was smoking, or just enjoying the night. But that was repeated every night, always at the same time. She did nothing but stay there motionless, her eyes fixed on my house. On the third night, I started to feel restless. I decided to leave the lights off and waited at the window, watching her without her noticing. That's when I noticed a detail that made me shudder. She didn't seem to be just looking at the house. She looked like she was expecting something. His eyes were not exactly turned to me or to the windows, but to the front door, as if waiting for someone or something to leave there. It made me lose sleep. Who acts like this in the middle of the night? What bothered me the most was that, in the following mornings, I began to hear the neighbors commenting on the woman. She was always a kind of isolated figure in the neighborhood, but now, it seemed that the whole thing was getting weirder. Some people said that she had a reputation for being eccentric, others that she had a peculiar behavior since her daughter died a few years ago. I wasn't sure what was true, but somehow, all this seemed to justify what I was seeing. At least until then. The feeling that something was wrong was already consuming me. On Friday night, the rain fell hard. Lightning illuminated the sky, and the wind seemed to push the trees as if the world was about to break. I was on the couch, watching something to try to distract my mind, when I heard the sound of the front door handle. Someone was trying to open it. I quickly looked out the window and saw there she was, the woman at my door, with her hand on the doorknob. My heart raced. What did she want there? Wasn't constant observation enough? Fear took over me. I couldn't think straight. I ran around the house, trying not to make noise, trying to get to the door as quickly as possible to see her. When I got there, the woman turned around without haste and said something that left me completely paralyzed. The house is no longer safe. What I didn't know is that she already had a strange history in the neighborhood. They said she wasn't very sure of her head, maybe even a little crazy. There were stories that she used to go out at night, walking around the city without a destination, muttering meaningless things. Some said that she isolated herself after her daughter's death, while others thought that she never overcame the loss and lost herself in her own mind. Anyway, everyone considered it strange, but no one imagined that it would become so terrifying. I just wanted her to leave and stop haunting me with that empty look. I didn't know what she wanted from me, but what scared me the most was that, even with all this, no one seemed to care about her oddities. She was so rooted in the community that no one thought she was really dangerous. But there, in front of the door, listening to those words from her, "The house is no longer safe," I realized that maybe there was something else. Something I wasn't understanding. How did she know that? What did she know about the house that I didn't know? And most terrifying of all, why was she telling me that? I could almost feel an evil presence in the air, something much darker than the simple madness of the woman. She disappeared in the rain before I could ask anything else, but the words stayed in my head, echoing. And for the first time since I moved into that house, I began to believe that she was right. Something in that house wasn't right. Something was wrong. I entered the house feeling a chill run down my spine. The soaked clothes stuck to my body, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the suffocating sensation that took over the environment. I closed the door, locking it tightly, and looked around. Everything seemed normal, but a restlessness persisted. Her phrase hammered in my mind. The house is no longer safe. What did that mean? What exactly made this house unsafe? I went to the windows and checked the outside. The rain made it difficult to see anything, but there was no sign of it. Still, the feeling of being watched did not leave me. I tried to ward off paranoia, and went to take a hot shower to calm down. But when I left the bathroom, I felt a strange smell in the air. It was a metallic, strong and nauseating smell. My stomach turned. I followed the smell to the kitchen and stopped, paralyzed. The back door, which I was absolutely sure to have locked before leaving, was ajar. The lock seemed intact, but the door was open enough to let rainwater accumulate on the sill. One detail made me hold my breath. There were wet footprints on the kitchen floor. Footprints that weren't mine. My heart raced. The footprints weren't mine. They were smaller, barefoot, and looked recent, as if someone had entered a few minutes before I arrived. I swallowed hard, trying to process that. The neighbor, would she have entered? But why? What if it wasn't for her? The metallic smell still impregnated the air, heavy and sickening. I followed the footprints, trying to ignore the feeling that something was about to happen. They took it to the living room, but there they disappeared, as if the person had stopped walking or was there, still inside the house. I looked around, trying to see anything out of place. The room looked exactly as I had left it. But then, I realized a detail that made my blood freeze. The armchair, which was always facing the TV, was facing the door. As if someone had been sitting there, facing the entrance, waiting for me to come back. The tension in the air was palpable. My instinct told me to get out of there as soon as possible, but something held me. Maybe it was curiosity, or the fear of leaving the situation unresolved. I looked at the window, but the rain outside was too strong to see anything. The house was too quiet, the only sound coming from the water hitting the glass. I took a deep breath and took another step, now with the goal of getting to my room and checking things, but something paralyzed me. From the corner of the room, something moved slowly. It wasn't a normal sound. It looked like a muffled laugh, as if someone was trying to hide, but couldn't contain the noise. I froze. I didn't know whether to turn around or stay there, motionless. But without further warning, the door to my room opened by itself, with a low creak, as if something had pushed from the inside out. The figure of the neighbor's wife appeared at the opening. His face was pale, expressionless, his eyes fixed on me in a cold way. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, motionless, and I began to wonder if maybe she had been there all the time, watching me as I entered, without me noticing. The air inside the house seemed heavy, almost unbearable. I didn't know what to do, how to react. My mind was 1,000, trying to process everything that was happening, but things didn't make any sense. The woman there, standing at the door of my room, seemed out of place, like a nightmare that had materialized in my reality. Suddenly, she took a step forward, as if she wanted to enter my space, but in a way that seemed more threatening than curious. I wanted to scream, run, but the words just didn't come out. Each of her movements seemed to be more calculated, as if she was waiting for my reaction. When she spoke, her voice was like a hoarse whisper, almost unintelligible, but enough to freeze my spine. The house is no longer safe. You shouldn't be here. I swallowed dry. What did she mean by that? How did she know that? And what did she want with my house? My heart was beating fast, and I finally took courage to take a step back. She didn't move, but her eyes were fixed on mine, as if she was watching my every action. I was about to take another step when she spoke again, more clearly this time. I saw everything. With the feeling that something very wrong was about to happen, I knew I needed to get out of there, but the woman seemed to become an even more oppressive presence. She was simply there, between me and the exit door, with no intention of moving away. I didn't know what to do. The only thing I could feel was a growing fear that took over my body. Every second seemed to last forever. I was stuck there, between the woman and the door, unable to react the way I would like. The survival instinct took me by surprise. In an impulse, I tried to take a quick step towards the door, but it was faster. With a sudden movement, she advanced towards me, putting her hand on the doorknob, as if she wanted to prevent me from leaving. The feeling of being cornered was unbearable. The only thing I could hear was my own heart beating, my breathing heavy, and the sound of rain hitting the window, creating an increasingly claustrophobic scenario. "You can't leave," she said, her voice firmer now. "You can't." Her presence, the way she was there, imposing, without any sign of regret, left me paralyzed. I tried once again to leave, now pushing the door hard, but she didn't give in. I was desperate. I only thought about one thing: escape. It was then that, like a gift from heaven, I heard a sound coming from the street. The sound of a car, maybe of someone who was passing by, and heard the confusion. I almost jumped for joy. The woman seemed to notice the same, because her expression changed. She seemed to know she was losing control of the situation. Before I could react, she moved away from the door and quickly disappeared into the darkness of the corridor. I took the chance. I shot out, without looking back. I ran to the front gate, and as soon as I reached it, I saw a car stopped on the street, a neighbor who was watching me, clearly worried about the screams he had heard. He quickly ran to me. "Is everything okay? "What happened?" he asked, clearly scared, but with a tone of urgency. I just shook my head, without words. What could I say? That a woman was in my house, warning that I shouldn't be there, and that, for some reason, she knew more than me? I had no explanation for that. I just knew that, somehow, that wasn't just a coincidence. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what. The police were called, and the house was searched, but they found nothing abnormal. The woman disappeared, as if she had never existed. In the end, no one knew who she was, or what she wanted from me. I went back to my room, and the feeling of being watched never left me. The worst of all was the deep silence that took over the house, an uncomfortable silence, as if she were still there, somewhere, waiting. What did she mean by "the house is no longer safe"? What did she know about the place that I didn't know? To this day, it haunts me. I still don't know what happened that night, but I know that, somehow, the woman knew something, and to this day, I wonder, did she really leave? Going hiking has always been one of my favorite hobbies, something that helped me relax after long and stressful weeks. That day, I had finished work a little earlier, and decided to take advantage of the last sunlight to walk on one of the short trails of a state park near my home. The weather was cool, the smell of wet earth filled the air, and there was almost no one there. It was the perfect kind of scenario to clear the mind. The way back was when I started to feel something strange. At first, it was just a nuisance, that slight feeling of being watched, but I tried to ignore it, until I realized a detail that made my stomach turn. Steps. Steps that seemed to match mine. If I slowed down, they also got slower. If I accelerated, they adjusted. There was no strong wind, no animal around. The only sound was that of the stuffy forest around me, and those steps that, at this point, had already made me completely tense. For a moment, I tried to convince myself that it was just another person coming back on the same trail, someone who, by coincidence, kept the same rhythm as me. But as the trail narrowed and became quieter, that sound began to affect me in a different way. It was as if the presence behind me was deliberately following my movements. And then I did a test. I stopped abruptly. The noise stopped too. My heart accelerated. I remained motionless for a few seconds, holding my breath. There was not enough wind to move branches or leaves, nothing that could have made that sound on its own. The only logical explanation was that someone really was there. But when I gathered the courage to look over my shoulder, I didn't see anything. Just the empty path behind me, the dirt trail, and the dense vegetation on both sides. Still, the feeling of being observed became even more intense. My throat dried up. The silence around seemed heavier, as if the forest was holding my breath with me. I took a few more hesitant steps, trying to hear any other sound besides my own. And then there it was again. Steps. Not an echo, not a small animal moving between the leaves. They were firm passes, following the same rhythm as mine. This time, I didn't turn around. Logic told me that, if there was someone there, facing it directly might be the worst mistake. My only focus now was to get off that trail as soon as possible. But when I looked at the ground, my stomach turned. There were fresh footprints next to mine, clearly marked on the wet earth. They followed every movement I made. But there was something wrong. They simply appeared there, out of nowhere, as if those who left them had never come from anywhere. My mind tried to find a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. How could someone be following me without me seeing him? And worse, how could those footprints just start out of nowhere? My body reacted before my mind processed. I shot in a clumsy run, feeling the weight of panic in each step. The trail narrowed, and the trees around seemed to close on me. Even running, my hearing captured everything. The branches snacking, the breathing accelerated, mine or something else's? It didn't matter. I just needed to get out of there. But then suddenly the steps stopped mid. Of nowhere. I was still running, but I heard nothing but my own panting breath and the wind swinging the leaves. As if whoever was following me had simply disappeared. That's when I felt the first cold drop on my face. The rain started as a light drizzle, but soon turned into a dense curtain, soaking my body and making the floor slippery. My instinct screamed for me not to stop, but the trail now seemed more treacherous. Every step was a risk of slipping and falling. The worst was not the rain or the cold, but the strange feeling that something was still there. Even without hearing footsteps, my whole body seemed to react to an invisible presence. A chill rose down my spine when I looked at the floor and saw that the footprints next to mine were still there, sharp, fresh, and were not erased by the rain. Suddenly, a dry snap broke the sound of rain, followed by a sudden impact on my shoulder. A heavy branch had been thrown at me, with enough force to make me stagger to the side. I turned around in a reflection, trying to see through the water curtain, but there was nothing but the soaked trees and the wind shaking the leaves. My heart was pounding in my chest. That wasn't a branch falling naturally, it was thrown. Someone or something was there with me. The idea that it could just be my imagination no longer made sense. I was being followed, and now attacked. I didn't want to wait any longer to find out who or what was there. Fear pushed me and I ran. The rain hindered my vision, my feet slipped in the mud, but I only thought about getting out of that trail as soon as possible. The noise of my own steps mixed with that of the rain, making it impossible to know if it was still being followed. When I finally saw the entrance to the park, I felt a suffocating relief. But before leaving the trail, I looked back one last time. In the middle of the trees, there were fresh footprints next to mine, but no shade, no one there. Whatever was following me, it seemed to have disappeared. Or maybe, I was still around, just waiting for the next opportunity.